So when you're talking about Dan Richard, you're talking about a man who sees the world through a different lens. He's not bound by the normal confines of shape and form.
When you think about the gravity of the project, it's making a RUDIS shoe, it's making a Dave Schultz shoe and a Snyder shoe, and you're talking about a brand that is wrestling, an icon in the sport, and the best athlete on the face of the earth. And that's the type of project that Dan Richard's all about.
When I think of Dan, there really is no separation between his work and his life. Dan is his work. He pours himself into it, and there's a reflection of himself in everything he creates.
So, I mean, the other shoe designers looked at the shoes that I was wearing and thought that those shoes would fit who I was. Dan looked at me, understood who I was as a person, and then brought a shoe to life that fit that mold.
I draw inspiration from a lot of the things that we do. You know, here living on the coast, the ocean is a daily part of our lives. You know, I mean, to walk across the street and watch the sun come up, or to listen to the sound of the waves, you know, it reminds you that you're living in a place with a definite lifestyle. You know, it's seafood and it's fishing, it's kayaking. You know, all of those things are part of our daily life here. You know, I'm happy to admit, I'd have to admit that, you know, all of that's a part of our inspiration. You know, on a daily basis, we put ourselves into everything that we do in work, you know, but to draw from, you know, to sit on the waves and to sit on the kayak out in the waves and to watch the swells and to watch the break of the wave and to allow it to pick you up and you know, you don't know which way you're going to turn, you don't know how you're going to read the wave, but once you're in it, then you do the best you can. You know, you make your decisions and you move on. You know, I think some of that is the way that we think about work as well. You know, this is the community here has been really supportive. You know, the group of friends that I have, the professionals that are in the area as well. You know, you don't have to go far in New England to come across another footwear professional. And so to share, you know, our home with them and to share our town is, you know, is all, you know, it's part of what we do on a daily basis. We don't want the stitch groove coming up there, right? So we're either going to have to start and stop, or we're going to have to come down through here and then stitch here.
So
and
maybe
then
we
come
can
up.
draw on one pair,
Yeah.
so next simple mold can open.
Yeah.
Dan doesn't like it when you say he's a shoe designer, because that's limiting. He's a designer. He can design anything. You know, that's part of his craft. It's a lot like, you know, a wrestler. It's not that you're a freestyle wrestler, it's you're a wrestler. And the funny thing is, Dan though chooses to really reside, you know, and dwell in shoe country. You know, he's amongst shoes all the time. And I guess that's why he's so great with that category and why, you know, he's been great for us.
So I think when you see greatness, and it's easy to identify, it's very hard to articulate. Like when I see, you know, a Picasso painting, I see greatness, but I can't articulate it. It's the same thing when I look at Dan's work. I can identify the greatness in the shoe, but I can't articulate it. But it's very easily understood when you look, when you touch, and you put on the shoe.
You know, I've always been visual, and so even as a high school student taking art classes, you know, I've always been a visual person, always drawing, you know, and that's always been a way of expressing myself. You know, I started in sports, not only wrestling, but football and baseball. My father was a coach, and being a teacher and a coach, you know, he was always working 2 or 3 jobs. So the way that we spent time together was that I would join him at practice. I enrolled at Michigan and walked on. You know, so I wrestled for a couple of years at Michigan, had a couple of knee operations, eventually failed my physical, but it was also just a good time to move on. You know, about that time is when I met Alan Samuels. A perfect ending for my wrestling career was to move on and focus on design. You know, for me, I spent my first few years as a young designer at Nike. I moved into design management at Nike. Spent about 12 years in total in the corporate world in design management and product development roles at Converse, Wolverine Worldwide, and Avia, you know, in addition to Nike. And then in 1995, I decided that it was really time for me to get back to the drawing board, you know, and to get back to creating.
Yeah, my first introduction to Dan Richard came by way of Scott Weaver. Scott had been really helping us with the project and is a guy who is, you know, has spent his whole life in footwear. And, you know, he was the one to identify, hey, based on our goals, based on what we were trying to do, there's one guy that can do this job. And it was Dan Richard. And as soon as we sat down and started collaborating, you could just tell that through Dan's intensity and passion that we were going to build something special. And looking at Dan's first designs and looking at, you know, I'd given him goals and I'd say, this is what we're trying to achieve. And looking at his first designs, you know, the first thought that came to mind is, can we actually do this? You know, I'm seeing these things on screen that are absolutely amazing, but can we actually build this? And Dan's reaction was like, well, yeah, of course. Why would you ask me that? And it just speaks to, you know, what he's really capable of.
We think that there's a little bit of a soft underbelly in wrestling, that as long as other people are going to continue to use sort of common athletic shoe terms, we'll create our own wrestling language. You know, I mean, and that's with RUDIS and being all about wrestling. We think that there's the opportunity to create a product language specific to wrestling. You know, so that's what a big part of all of this is about. In some of our early prototypes, not in some, but in all of our earlier prototypes, we wanted to create contact points, again, around the drive zones, but then we also wanted to stiffen the shoe on the bottom. So we looked at using flexible composites, you know, so that we could create non-stretch, you know, on a longitudinal axis, you know, from heel to toe. So we worked with different stiffening plates or flexible composites in the bottom.
You know, we didn't just want to design a shoe because we wanted to be in the shoe marketplace. We wanted to design a shoe that really spoke to wrestling, that felt like wrestling. And I think there's a lot of small things that go into that. When you pull it out of the box, you know, you should, and you put it on your foot, there shouldn't be some long break in time. It should be ready to go. And it should fit your foot well. You shouldn't have to wear 2 pairs of socks. And you know what? There should be a level of both flexibility and durability built into the product. And these are all the things, you know, that Dan has to tackle and had to tackle.
We started with the last, you know, the very form that you build the shoe around. You know, in the end, it's what the shoe looks like and it's how the shoe fits. And we developed a last specific to Kyle that is about the way Kyle Snyder feels on the mat. Again, this is built on the Kyle Snyder last, which is a dual crown last. You can see it a little bit here so that, you know, you'll see these raised areas, these raised crowns under the, right over the 5th and the 1st metatarsal head. Those are the drive zones of a wrestling shoe in that area. So when you're up on your forefoot, those are the points of contact on the mat.
Dan is so much more than just a shoe designer. It's not just about how the shoe is built. He understands an athlete's foot in motion.
You know, the shape of the Snyder outsole was driven by wrestling, but the location of the metatarsal heads, the location of the arches in the foot, you know, and knowing how the foot expands and how the foot works was really important. You know, you can, if I overlay the outsole, you know, the skeleton onto the outsole, you can see the drive zones. You know, you can see the location of the metatarsal heads. You can see, you know, the movement and the stretch, you know, so that when I load the forefoot and that arch spreads, you know, you can directly relate it to the way the outsole works as well. We've created a controlled stretch and a controlled slide in the outsole so that it works with the foot.
Dan approached the project as the ultimate creative challenge because it's not about the color, it's not about the aesthetics, it's not about making something look cool, but it's about making something that people want to put on their feet. And as soon as they put it on their feet, they want to move and wrestle and compete.
RUDIS and Sly Fox are built on the same platform. but the uppers, RUDIS uses an engineered air mesh, great breathability, great strength, while Sly Fox uses an engineered knit. So both shoes have a little different feel, but both are for a specific position, within wrestling, for a specific consumer. And then Kyle Snyder is all about being the best, and truly from the ground up, that shoe, from the shape of the shoe, the fit of the shoe, the outsole, the lasting board, the knit upper materials, the tongue, the instep, the lace lock, everything about that shoe is built for wrestling, and it's built to be the best. In order to pull this off in time, a number of things had to happen concurrently. So we always, a factory is about production. So clearly in every conversation with a factory, they want to get to production as quickly as possible. We resisted that a little bit, and we were looking for culture. We were looking for somebody that was willing to take that step with us and to build something that was a little bit different.
He just walks into the factory and he just seems to own the place. And people treat him like he does, people he's never met before. They know that Dan's the guy who knows what's going on, and he's that artist bringing everything together.
Every day my goal is to be a better version of myself than I was yesterday. And it's the same thing. We're doing the same thing here with these shoes. Each year we want to create and be more innovative than the last year. But even 15 years from now, when we have this new and improved shoe, we can still look back on this first Snyder Caliga, the Sly Fox, and the RUDIS 1, and they will stand the test of time.